Hi everybody and welcome back to episode 3 of Lessons from a Dad. Today we're going to be going over drills and impact drivers. All right everybody, let's go with week number 2, attempt number 4 to get good audio and video on the same file. Small time YouTubing is tough sometimes, folks. So let's get into it. Let's get into the parts and the specifics of the drill, okay? So every drill has got the same basic parts, and those parts are the jaws. The jaws are what actually holds the bit, all right? You can see me in these videos moving the jaws in and out. The way that we can move the jaws in and out to hold different size bits is through the next piece that we're going to talk about. It's the chuck. The chuck is actually what you use to hold and tighten and loosen the jaws, all right? Most modern drills are going to have what's called a keyless chuck, as you see here on this video. I can just hold the chuck. An older drill or a drill press is still going to have what's called a keyed chuck. I don't have a drill that has a keyed chuck, but it literally is a key that you will tighten the chuck with. The next thing that we have is the speed or torque selector. Most modern drills are going to have this as well. 9 times out of 10, you're going to have it on the high speed setting. That's for drilling and driving screws. You can get pretty good at controlling the speed whenever you are using that. For me, I think most all drills are this way. Every drill I've got a DeWalt, I've got this Bosch here. Number 2 is the setting for high speed. Number 1 is the setting for high torque. It's going to go slower. It's going to have more torque. I'm going to drill and drive screws on setting number 2, the high speed setting. I'm going to drive things like lag bolts and stuff with drill setting number 1, okay? The next thing that you've got is the forward-backward selector. You see me here with both the cordless Bosch and the corded rigid. Both of them have a selection to either go forward, which is to drive something in or drill a hole, or to go backwards, that is to back something out. You can back the bit out, or you can back the screws out. And you have what's called a clutch, okay? The clutch is the part of the drill that will give you resistance, all right? 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna use my drill in the drill setting. I've gotten really comfortable with driving screws on the drill setting, so I don't blow things out. I don't apply too much torque. I can run it right up to the point where I have it and then stop and just give it a little bit. If you're not super comfortable, back that resistance setting down a little bit. You'll see in this video, I back it down to 1 and then a 5, and it kind of jumps in my hand. But when it jumps in my hand, it's because I'm applying resistance and that clutch is skipping, and you'll notice that the jaws aren't moving. On the drill setting, you get 100% of the torque all the time. There is no skip setting, okay? So let's say I'm doing pocket holes. I don't want to drive through the pocket hole. If I'm using that, I will back it down, and then the clutch is that resistance. So when I get that screw run right up to the point where it's tight in that pocket hole, the clutch engages and I will hear that clutch skip, and I'll know that it's tight in there, as tight as I need it to be, without blowing through the joint. The last thing that you've got is the trigger. These are called triggers. They're not on-off switches. A switch is something that's 100% on or 100% off. A trigger is a variable speed selection option. So when I'm using this trigger, you'll see me, I can go really, really slow, or I can go all the way up to as fast as it can go, which is drilling speed. So let's talk about the actual drilling, okay? So when you're using your drill as a drill, you're not using it as a driver, okay? So a lot of the stuff that we've talked about with the clutch and the jaws and the chuck and all that stuff, and the speed torque selector, a lot of that stuff goes mostly for driving screws. You can apply the different concepts of driving screws based upon what you need out of your torque selector, your clutch, and all that stuff, okay? When you're drilling, make sure that your clutch setting is in the drill setting so that you're not meeting resistance, and make sure your speed selector is on the high speed setting. You want it to go as fast as you can go for most drill bits. There are some exceptions, and we'll get to those in a minute. But let's actually talk about the major drill bit types that you're going to use, okay? So the first major drill bit that you're going to have is what's called an HSS. I always mess that up. It's a high-speed steel bit. These are bits that can be used for both wood and metal, okay? The design of these are such that they don't have a really fine point on them. They actually scoop the material out. So as you watch the videos here, you're gonna see that it's actually scooping material out. The reason these work on both metal and wood is because of that scooping action. It's not shearing, it's not cutting, it's scooping. So when you're using HSS bits, or what's called a twist bit, on metal, sometimes you'll get really long spiral offcuts. And it's because you're continually scooping that metal out. One of the things to be aware of on these bits is because they don't have a really defined point. Sometimes on harder materials, you see me using them here on soft woods. I'm using one on fir and one on pine. On metal and on harder woods like oak or maple or walnut or something like that, these bits have a tendency to wander when you're starting them up. So what you'll do is you can take a punch, get you a little starter point there with your punch, and that keeps these bits from walking on you. If you need that precise hole, you're gonna wanna keep that bit from walking. Use a punch a spot where you want it to drill, and then that will keep your bit from walking. These bits need to be kept sharp, as most all bits do, but these are really imperative to be kept sharp because they don't produce good holes if they're not sharp. The next major type of bit that you've got is what's called a brad point bit. Brad point bits are only for wood. You cannot use a brad point bit on metal. Really good brad point bits, and I say really good meaning expensive, really good brad point bits will have what's called spurs on them. Spurs are left over from an older bit that we're going to talk about later called an auger bit. These spurs are literally cutters on the outside that cut around the hole, and it produces a really good, really clean hole. These brad point bits, you see that they have a sharp point. They start well, they don't wander, because that point, you can actually press it in and it bites into the wood. These that I have, you see, I don't have the spurs. These are relatively cheap. I just needed some brad point bits and I didn't have a lot of money to spend, but the point keeps them from wandering. I get fairly decent holes, let's say. Brad point bits, only wood, don't wander. You can spend some money and get some spurs. The next type of bit that we have is called a Forstner bit. I did mention earlier, when you're using your drill, you're going to want to run it as fast as you can run it once you get the hole started. The Forstner bit is the exception. Forstner bits, because of their design, you see here in this design, they have the spurs on the outside, but they also have internal cutting blades. That produces a flat bottom and it produces a clean exterior hole. So, because of this design of the Forstner bits come with a recommended speed usage, okay? It's a little chart that comes with every set of Forstner bits. You can get these from moderately small to relatively big. The bigger they go, the slower you need to drill with them, okay? it's hard to get the actual setting, just recognize you need to be slower the bigger the bit is, okay? Because of the torque that's being applied, because of the cutting action. It's actually cutting, it's not shearing, it's not digging, it's actually cutting the wood. So, go slower, the bigger the Forstner bit. And again, if you need a flat bottom, a Forstner bit is a good choice. All right, the last most common bit that you're gonna see is what's called a spade bit. A spade bit is good at drilling good, quick, rough holes. A spade bit generally will not produce a good, clean hole. Spade bits have a big issue with what's called blowout. Spade bits and twist bits are really bad at blowout. Blowout is when you blow through the bottom of whatever you're drilling, and it really produces a rough outside of the hole. For spade bits, for twist bits, for any bit really, a good way to stop blowout is to put a sacrificial piece. So drill your hole into what you're drilling in, and then put a piece that's sacrificial that you don't mind drilling through under that. And it will actually help the fibers, like clamp it down so it's tight, and it will help the fibers be cut more smoothly, and you'll produce a much, much better hole on the backside, okay? One of the things that you need to be aware of, this last bit that we're going to talk about is called an auger bit. An auger bit is an older bit, okay? You can still buy them, but used to they were used with what's called a brace, okay? This is a brace. The brace is what holds the auger. It's the old drill, essentially, but you are powering it. Auger bits are amazing. If you can get an old set at a garage sale or at an antique store or something like that, go ahead and make that purchase. Be aware though that some of the smaller battery powered drills, they may not be able to fit an auger bit. My bigger corded rigid drill, it can hold auger bits, but my smaller Bosch can't. But the good thing about them is they have really big, what's called flutes. As you noticed, every one of the drill bits that we have, except for the Forstner and the Spade, they have the little spirals that go up. Those are called flutes. The auger bits have big, it's not technically a flute, but they do have the big spirals going up that move the material out. That's the purpose of the flute on the twist bits and the brad point bits. It moves the material out. The auger bits actively move them out in a similar way, but produces a good clean hole. It's easy to start because you can see it's got a screw on the end of it. That screw actually pulls the bit through. They are easily resharpened. If you get an older set, they have spurs that can be sharpened that produce an amazingly clean hole. Again, get the older ones because I've got some newer ones and the newer ones don't have spurs on them. The newer ones are a lower quality metal. So I would recommend getting an older set at a garage sale or an antique store. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is impact drivers. This is an impact driver, this is a drill. You can see that the impact driver is much more compact than the drill, and it's because of the design. So without getting too deep into it and cutting my impact driver open, the impact driver has a heavy spring-loaded slip gear in here basically. And so spins just like a normal drill, but when it meets a little bit of resistance, and you'll see me in these videos driving here, you'll hear a tick, 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 tick. That tick, tick, tick is the mechanism in here slipping. It's a spring-loaded mechanism, and then that tick is whenever it's a fairly heavy piece comes back and impacts the drive mechanism again, okay? It's really good at keeping the bit seated in the screw, particularly Phillips screws. Phillips screws are notorious for stripping out. You can see that the screw will strip out with a regular drill if you're not really careful. Impact driver drives it no problem. So, not going to drill with an impact driver, even though you can get bits that are drills that have an impact driver attachment to them. Basically, all it is a driver. All impact drivers have what's called a collet. This collet is where you insert the tool that you're going to use to drive your screws, okay? Whatever it is, it's a quick attach, quick release mechanism, seats in there easily. You can actually have drills that will seat in here, but because of that impact mechanism, you're never going to maintain a good enough speed to be able to drill good, clean holes, okay? In a pinch, you can drill with it, but it's not recommended. So that's what we've got today. We've got drills, we've got the bits, and we've got the impact driver. These are basic tools that every guy needs to know how to use. So, until next episode, go do something good. I will see you on the next one.